Section 2 of The Black Cat, Volume 2, Number 7, April 1897. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Read by Julie Burks. The Black Cat, Volume 2, Number 7, 1897, Section 2, Westward Ho, by J. Wesley Glover. You see, it all came about this way. There has been, the past year and a half, a sort of birthday party craze in our neighborhood. Nearly everybody of prominence in the township had had a surprise party except me. Old Squire Morrell, Uncle Rufus Parton, Joe Levitt, and nearly all the rest had been honored, and in each case I had done my best to make the event successful, so I began to think that my time was coming next, especially as my birthday was drawing near. Now, I am not a perfect man, but I am a very modest man, so I did not throw out any hints in an open way, but still made no secret of when my birthday was due, and perhaps I allowed it to be generally understood that I was not going to be away from home on that day. I am not the sort of a man to get angry at being suddenly surprised by his fellow citizens with a lot of presents and good things to eat. Before long, I saw little signs that looked as though my hints had taken root, so to speak. But I didn't feel quite sure of it until one day, being in conversation with a neighbor in regard to the time when we were boys, he, pretending to be very innocent, of course, asked how old I was. Then I knew at once what he was driving at, and realized that I was in for it. However, it is my nature to let others show their deepest feelings while I keep mine carefully concealed. So I didn't let on that I suspected anything, but I kept my eyes perfectly wide open, watching for further symptoms, and, being gifted with the faculty of putting two and two together, I saw plenty of them. Did you ever notice how easy it is to see signs of things that are going to happen when you know how and where to look for them? And it doesn't take much imagination either. If it had, I should have been the last man to notice them, for I never was much on imagination. I have always left that to women and poets. It is because I have what scientists call an observing mind that I see meaning in what looks like accidents to other folks. But to return to my surprise party, with half an eye I could see indications that there was going to be the biggest birthday surprise party that had been in the township for a long time. And didn't I deserve it? Hadn't I been a highly respectable citizen all my life? Hadn't I filled the public offices of coroner and inspector of roads for 4 years each? And hadn't I been the ringleader in all the other surprise parties for the last 15 months? I just knew that those fellows whom I had gotten up surprise parties on were going to get even with me now. Why, there was not a man, woman, or child but who, when they met me, seemed to look at me in a knowing sort of way, as if they were thinking, "Look out, old fellow, we'll surprise you one of these days." Well, I would quietly laugh all to myself, thinking how they were fooled. I had a notion sometimes to let on that I knew all about it, but I thought that probably I had better not, and now I am mighty glad I didn't. Well, the more I put my observing mind to work, the more signs I discovered. Of course, to the man who, as I said, can put two and two together, a birthday surprise party naturally suggests presents. So when I happened to be in the village store one day, and a lady who lives not far from me came in to buy a shaving mug, I knew what it meant, when, upon seeing me, she blushed and hesitated. Of course that mug was meant for me. Well, as luck would have it, the very next day I was in that same store, and I saw Squire Morrell's wife buying one too. Thus I began to be afraid it was going to be overdone in shaving mugs, especially as I hadn't shaved any nigh on to 10 years, though my wife often wanted me to, and so did my daughter Sarah, and I thought the neighborhood must be of the same opinion, and was going to give me a strong hint along that line. I didn't feel just plumb sure of it, though, until a day or so after when, just strolling into the store by chance, I found John Price, who lives over near the woods above my place, buying another shaving mug. When I saw that, I had a great notion to call his attention to some other handsome things I wanted, as being more suitable for presents, but I hated to hurt his feelings by showing that I'd found out what they were trying to hide from me. Besides, as Grim, the storekeeper, had just gotten in a lot of mugs and was making a specialty of them by advertising to sell them at cost, I concluded they had a perfect right to buy them for me because they were the cheapest things that were suitable for a man. After all, it was a pleasure to think of the lots of presents I was going to receive, but I wondered what I would do with all those shaving mugs. It finally occurred to me that I could exchange some of my duplicate birthday presents for something more fitting, all on the quiet, of course, without giving offense to the donors. About this time I told several of my townspeople that I had a great notion to get myself a nice cuckoo clock, or rocking chair, or golden-headed cane, but if they took the hint, they never let on. Well, as my birthday drew near, you have no idea how kindly I felt towards my neighbors, and on what an era of good feeling stole over me as I realized that they were all so intent on creating happiness for me. Pretty soon I thought I had better, in a general way, make ready for the occasion, so I began to fix up things about the place, and I was surprised to find how many things needed fixing. In the first place, knowing there'd be lots of teams, I set out 6 new hitching posts in front of our place. Then I remembered there would be some people of prominence here that always kept things nice at home, and so I fixed up a lot of gates and bars that had been off their hinges for a long time, and attended to some other needed repairs that I had somehow overlooked before. It is wonderful how the prospect of a lot of agreeable company sets your mind to working till you can't get along a day without things you haven't missed in years. That was the case with me, anyway. No sooner had I got things straight outside than I began to notice how sort of old and bare everything looked inside compared to the houses of some of those who would be sure to visit us. The parlor wallpaper in particular looked so faded and streaked, owing to a leak in the roof during the flood spring before last. I wondered how I could have stood it so long, and I made up my mind I would surprise my wife by papering that room all over new. By the time that was done, the other rooms looked so old-fashioned that I had to put new paper on the dining room and sitting room also, and that wasn't all. Before my wife got through exclaiming over this surprise, I got to feeling so in a glow at seeing things look nice and thinking how they would impress my surprisers that I went straight off and bought her a plush rocking chair, a marble-top table, and a set of blue and red tumblers for lemonade. Then, remembering all of a sudden that we'd neglected literature and art all the years I had been serving my township as coroner and road inspector, I sent to the city and surprised my wife with a picture called The Monarch of the Glen, and for my daughter I got 2 volumes of Garlands of Verse for the new center table. I also bought a supply of lemons, raisins, citron peel, flavoring extracts, a sack of XXX pastry flour, and borrowed 2 gallons of elderberry wine from a man up the road whom I had helped coon hunting last fall. When my wife wanted to know what was the matter with me, I threw her off the trail by telling her that all of a sudden I was feeling young again and wanted a feast such as Mother used to give me. Finally, I made up my mind to surprise my wife further by cutting a lot of firewood, and in fact, she seemed more astonished and tickled at this than at anything I had done. But when I came to examine the axe, I was a good deal disgusted and discouraged. My folks never were much on keeping an axe sharp anyway, and ours looked as though it hadn't seen a grindstone for nearly a year, and how we had cut the wood all that time was a mystery to me. It was certainly a sign of a lazy person to work with such a dull tool, but I didn't like to speak of it then, for I didn't want to make any hard feelings just before my surprise party. Well, I worked away fixing up until my hands were full of blisters, but I at last got everything round the place in apple pie order, and then all there was to do was to wait with patience the expected day. I had, with my store clothes on, practiced before the looking-glass on the surprised look I intended to wear, and had it all down fine, even to the smile. My suspicions were strongly confirmed every day, for even in the kitchen I could see that something unusual was taking place. My birthday comes on the 13th, and on the morning of the 12th, Maria, that's my wife, said she wanted me to go to town that day to take a lot of butter and eggs, but I knew it was only a blinder to get me away all the morning so they could get ready unbeknownst to me, but I never let on, and in order to help them along so they could have plenty of time to get things up in shape, I told her I would also go on to see a cousin of mine about some things, and would not be back till evening. I thought that probably, as my cousin lived over in the next township, they would forget to invite his folks, so I decided to go over and let him know what was going to happen at our place, that he and his wife might come over and see the fun. I got back a little earlier than I expected, and sure enough, as I went into the kitchen, they not hearing me until I opened the door, I saw my daughter Sarah run off in the pantry with a big chocolate cake. I called her back and let on I was awful cross. They wasted their time baking expensive chocolate cakes. Then Sarah began to cry and said that I never allowed her to have any fun, and that she had promised to go to a picnic and wouldn't go if she couldn't even take a cake. But I understand women's little ways and didn't say much, for I knew it was all put on. The great day was finally ushered in. I couldn't stay in bed that morning, so I got up early, and as I went out to the barn, just as it was getting daylight, I fancied that the sun shone a little brighter than usual. The birds seemed to sing a little sweeter, the rooster seemed to crow a little louder, and the old gobbler seemed to feel his importance more than ever. But in all this I might have been mistaken. I was a little excited, I must confess, and under such circumstances a man is liable to be mistaken. I thought I would keep busy around the house and barn, so as to let on that I suspected nothing, until near the time they would come. I knew they would be here about 10 o'clock, and make a full day of it, for that is the way they always do on these occasions. And sure enough, about 9:30, a neighbor's boy came to borrow a cup of risings for bread. He did not see me, but I heard him ask how I was. Of course, I knew this was only to find out if I was at home, and I looked for the crowd pretty soon. After the boy had gone, my wife asked me to go up to the other end of our woods and get her some sage leaves for tea. I laughed to myself, for I knew that that was only a trick, the last straw, to get me out of sight of the house until the people came, and then have me surprised by seeing the whole house full when I came back. But I kept quiet and started off with the basket to get the sage leaves, though the thought did come to me that I would be sort of ashamed to be seen with those old clothes on by all the people and their families who would, of course, be dressed up for the party. In fact, I had a notion to go back to the house and sneak out my good clothes to the barn to put on when I came back, but on second thought I gave up the plan, as I knew that it would let the cat out of the bag, as the saying is. To give the folks plenty of time to get all nicely fixed in the house before I got back, I took my time and gathered a big basketful of sage leaves before I started back, practicing, as I went along, my surprised look. When I got to the barn, I could see no signs of them yet, but it struck me that they had tied their horses to the new hitching posts out along the road in front of the house where I couldn't see them, and were all in the parlor. And sure enough, as I started toward the house, I saw the parlor shutters that were always closed, excepting when we have company, wide open. Ha ha! Don't they keep quiet, though? I thought to myself, but there'll be music in the air in a few minutes. And just as I expected, there was my wife, standing in the kitchen door, all excited like. As I came up, she said, "There's some folks in the parlor come to see us." I smiled all to myself and started for the parlor, knowing it would be full of people. But where were my eyes? When I opened the door, all I saw was Cousin John and his wife, and not another living soul. As soon as they saw me, they both cried, "Happy birthday!" And before I could catch his eye, Cousin John exclaimed, "Where are all the rest of the people that you told us about yesterday?" I could have sunk through the floor as my wife looked at me. I felt as if she saw through the wallpaper and the plush chair and the firewood and the garland of verses, And the worst of it was, I felt as if she saw through me. We had dinner at 12, and still nobody came. I can tell you I felt weak in the knees and couldn't eat much dinner, though we had the red and blue tumblers and 2 pies and a cake made of my surprise bag of flour. Well, would you believe it? The whole day passed, and not another person made his or her appearance. Not another man, woman, or child, or anybody else, and I was never more surprised in all my life. Why, I wouldn't have been near as much surprised if the whole township had turned itself loose on me. I was disgusted with the whole business, but what am I to do about it? I feel that I have been abused and misused by those whom I have served so faithfully, and I want revenge. Revenge is the word. And if there is anything like getting it, I will have it. I would at once bring suit against the whole township, but hardly know how to bring it. It would scarcely come under the head of breach of promise, because nobody actually promised me anything, though their actions did speak louder than words. A case of false pretense might be made out, but that is hard to establish unless you can get the right kind of a lawyer. But I believe conspiracy with intent to make me feel bad would be pretty near the mark, and in all probability it will be brought in that shape. When I go to town next week with another lot of butter and eggs, I'll ask my lawyer if there's any chance of recovering the money I paid out for those hitching posts and so forth, and there may be a separation in our family pretty soon, too. For even to this day, whenever I hear a wagon coming up the road and happen to say, "I wonder who that is," my wife exclaims, "Why, Ephraim, I guess it is somebody coming to your surprise party." That is why I am seriously thinking of taking the advice offered by the founder of the New York Tribune and go West. End of section 2.